In Titus 2, older women are commanded to teach what is good so they can help younger women love their husbands and children. On today's show, you'll hear from older women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Well, welcome to part 2 of Women Saviors of the Bible. In our first program, we talked about Deborah. We talked about the wise woman in the city of Abel, and we talked about Rahab. And tonight we have a few more that we want to talk about, and we're going to start with Esther. So, ladies, welcome again. If you didn't see part 1, you would not have been introduced to Montelle White, who is on the program for the first time, and we welcome you so much, Montelle, and just glad you could be with us and appreciate your work on this subject. And of course, Nikki Lee, who is not with us a lot of time, busy woman. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
And Colleen, I tell you, you're a standby for us. You're always, you're ready for us, and we appreciate it so much. Thank you. So we want to talk first of all about Esther. Of course, there's a whole book of Esther. But the passage that I always think about with Esther is when Mordecai says to her, "Who knows but that you are come to the kingdom time as this?" And that particular thought oftentimes guides me when I think, well, somebody ought to do something. And then I think, oh, wait. I should. So it's just that's one of the things I think. So when we think about Esther, who did she save?
Her people.
Yeah, her people. That's right. Not just her son, not just her uncle Mordecai, cousin, uncle, but all the people. I mean, it was through her that all the people had the opportunity to defend themselves. And in fact, just the fact that they were going to defend themselves kind of kept a lot of the problem from escalating. So what Bible principles do we think about when we think about Esther? Colleen, do you have a thought for us there? How are you doing?
Well, once she got it, she was courageous. I think what I was thinking more of, I identify her in some ways, but not so much the biblical principles, because she really had to be pressed to do the right thing. But once she got it, she was courageous and she had a plan and she pushed ahead and she was successful. Biblical principle, I guess, follow your conscience. Once she realized that it was all on her shoulders, she did the right thing, and she made sure the plan worked.
I guess maybe she was a young woman. I mean, she wasn't a mature necessarily woman. I mean, she had been taken into the king's palace at a young age. So, she would not have been used to taking the lead on things necessarily. Montelle, do you have a thought?
Like in Esther 4, verse 20, it says that, she did what Mordecai told her to do as when she was brought up by him. So she's in subjection to him as like her father, and also when she moves into the palace and she's being groomed to come before the king, she accepts the eunuch's advice to her, and doesn't try to do her own thing. And she turns out to be the one that's the most favored and becomes the queen. And it's because she's willing to follow good advice.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. Nikki?
So there's several things in this story that are so interesting, but in chapter 4, interestingly enough, there's a lot that goes on in chapter 4, but chapter 4, she gets this news from her her female servants and the eunuchs. I find it interesting that she sends to Mordecai this, she sends him some clothes. Like, I guess it was I don't know, what was it? It just says a garment, sent him some garments.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't accept them. So I've often wondered about that. Like, why was he thinking, like, this isn't what I was expecting from what I was sharing? Like, clothes? What is this going to do?
How's this going to help me? Yeah.
Right. Almost like, okay, I'm not sure she understands, like, how serious this is.
Right.
I don't know. I just always question that part. Like, I wonder, he was like, I'm not accepting. This is not what that's not what I was expecting. So of course, further into the chapter, when that message gets back to her and they're going back and forth, messaging each other. And then in verse 13, Mordecai told the messenger to reply to Esther, don't think that you will escape the fate of all the Jews because you're in the king's palace.
Mm-hmm.
That gives me chill bumps. Like, when I hear that, he's like, you are one of us, right? Like, remember that you are one of us. Then he goes on to say in verse 14, if you keep silent at this time, like, if you don't speak up right now, relief and deliverance will come to the Jewish people from some other place. You know how we know that God is not specifically spoken of in the book of Esther, but we know that his providence is all through it. Like, it screams God. For him to say it's going to come from another place, that's because God keeps his promises. Like, if you don't step up and do this, it's going to happen.
Right.
And then who knows, perhaps you've come to your royal position for this moment, not for King Ahasuerus, it had nothing to do with that. So a biblical principle I think about with this story is, and I guess this is twofold, putting myself into this position. There are times where I pray about something. And of course she did. She asked Mordecai to tell everybody to fast with me, please. Like, she knew this is serious now. Like, I can't do this by myself. I need us to be unified on this. So they fasted and prayed with her. But thinking about that's what I was saying, thinking about the biblical principle and applying it to myself is, I can pray for something. And then something will happen. I'm like, that's not what I was expecting. That's not how I thought that would turn out. But these are, God's plans. Like, man can plan so much in their lives, but it doesn't mean that it will go exactly that way, because God's will. I don't know. I'm rambling now, but that's just one of the thoughts I thought of. Like, when we pray, when we go to the Father with whatever it is on our hearts, the answer may look different than what you are expecting. Simply because his will be done.
Yeah.
It will be done. It just may not be in the way that you think it will.
Exactly. Colleen? Thoughts here?
Well, you asked the question, how are you like one or more of these women? How am I like Esther? The first, she had to be, she wasn't asking to be put in this role at all. She was rounded up. She was pushed everywhere. She never had a choice. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times you end up in situations, and I like how she ended up, she did have to be pushed to do it, but she did the right thing in the end. The other question you asked was, who do you know who's like Esther? Well, I thought of this. Esther faced persecution with a plan. Once she realized that they were under severe persecution and that she was going to die with the rest of the nation, she had a plan. I know someone who was persecuted for being a Christian at work, and we know that because we know that was the situation. It's not a question. I'm not just conjecturing. It really was. But what the person did was kept their supply lines open and always made sure, since they were worried about, concerned about losing their job, they kept real tight focus on their finances and their investments, and even started a business just because this person that was persecuting would always threaten that they were going to get fired, and make a little comments. So it scared this person, and so she did what she could. She had a plan, and he even started a business just in case she lost her job. So I think in that way, that kind of Esther reminded me of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good point.
Very good.
Then I also ask about the connection to Jesus, any connections to Jesus. And one that, a historical one that I thought about was that it was from this group of people in Babylon that the remnant came, that went back to Jerusalem. And from some of them, somewhere, was through the lineage that Christ came, that remnant that came back. And so what she did kept the line of, David, the family of David, kept them alive, because she was, as you say, she had to finally be convinced that this is what you need to do. Mm-hmm. Your life is in danger too. But when she realized it, then she stepped up and did what needed to be done. And they were all, as you say, in danger of dying through Haman's, decree. Had it gone ahead, they were all in danger of death. Her danger was a little more personal, maybe, certain, with perhaps the king could have killed her for him. So that was one of the things I thought about with her. It wasn't like, well, eventually, or when everybody is attacked. It was really a personal, I guess, in a sense like that for her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I also think about her two names, right? She made a choice. She was, I can never pronounce this properly, Hadassah. Right, that was her Jewish name, but her Persian name was Esther. Yeah. While she's in the king's palace, she's Esther.
What they called her, yeah.
But she chose Hadassah. She chose Hadassah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whew.
Yep. It's a good one. Well, let's think about Miriam. That was another one that another one of the women that saved someone. And Miriam's was a little bit more singular and personal, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm.
We know the story about how that Moses was born. All the male children were to be killed, and Moses's parents kept him alive, hidden for 3 months, till they just could not hide him anymore. Anybody that's had a baby knows there comes a point where everybody knows you're.
Yeah.
You know, especially in a small, situation like theirs. And so his mother made the ark and made it so that it would float, and then put him in the area where Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe. And then Miriam set Miriam to watch to see what would happen. And, she watched. And then when Pharaoh's daughter came and she said, "Oh, what a beautiful baby," she pulled him out of the ark and as to keep him. And I can just see Miriam just coming up and saying, "Can I get you a nurse? Would you like me?"
Yes.
So she said, "Good idea. We need one of those. I need a wet nurse, to take care of him." And so she goes and gets her mother, and they tell her, "We'll pay you to take care of this child and raise him up," and how brave she needed to be.
So brave.
And one of the things I thought about was, there was big old snakes in the river. There were crocodiles in the river. And, she was standing close to the river to be able to see. And while they probably kept a place where they tried to keep all those things away, they didn't have guns and such. They would just be trying to, scare them off a little bit. But here's a baby in the water, not in the water, but in an ark in the water. And the crocodiles knew he was there. So, you see God's protection, and you see the strength that it would take Miriam to wait. So she wasn't seen spying on the, Pharaoh's daughter and so forth. So I think of that a lot about Miriam as a child. Any other thoughts on that or on her? Some of the questions I asked. Go ahead.
She was a quick thinker and acted quickly to procure a life for him of privilege. Really, not just sparing his life, but giving him a life in the palace of Pharaoh. And
Pharaoh's daughter was, she was really taken with him. He was a pretty child, and so she really wanted him.
She was a quick thinker. I like that. But anybody that, if you thought somebody was going to take your little baby brother and you'd never seen him, you would be a quick thinker.
I guess so.
To taking God's message to people and doing God's work and be thinking of it like our life depends on it. And being sharp and quick and creative, whatever it takes to try to reach people and to show God that we really respect his word and we really want to carry it to people. And that'll make us quick thinkers and make us ready to act when there's an opportunity.
Yes. One thing I think about is in Exodus chapter 2, verse 4, when it says, "Then his sister stood at a distance in order to see what would happen to him." So yes, like Colleen said, that's his sister and that's her brother. So her baby brother, not being able to grow up with him, and just so many things. I'm sure we're just flooding her mind. Also with wanting to make sure he was safe. But the part that gets me is in order to see what would happen to him. She's watching over him, protecting him. I think about us as Christians, Christian sisters, Christian brothers, looking out for one another, bearing one another's burdens, being there, be it being hospitable or whatever it is, whenever there's a need. Are we looking out for one another? Spiritually speaking, how is that person's faith? How is your faith? So how can't talk tonight, how are our connections with
Mm.
one another?
Mm-hmm.
Are we watching over one another? Are we trying to keep each other safe, without being forceful and without being, pushy and all of that, but just genuinely, we're supposed to be on this journey together. So that's what I think of when I picture her just kind of hiding, but also keeping her eyes on him to make sure that he was safe.
Mhm.
Nikki,
Mhm.
do you
Good.
think that people always like for you to do that? Have you ever had any hitches when you've tried to
Oh yeah.
look out for people? Like what would be a case?
Oh,
Can
yeah.
you think of any offhand?
Yes. This was a younger girl, high schoolish. So I guess I kind of get it. But this particular situation was, she was dating someone that was questionable. She's a Christian. He's not a Christian. But yes, they're in high school. They're not, dating to get married right now, and it wasn't just me who could see the troubles that were going on. Even her demeanor would change. Sometimes, we wouldn't see her showing up at devotions anymore. And it was like, so that's kind of what brought up the, hey, where have you been? You've been missing out on some of our devos. Oh, I've been hanging out with, and so it was kind of like, it wasn't taken very well,
Right.
Which is sad,
Mhm.
because I truly do believe that, the early church, they had all things in common. Yes, when you think about it monetarily, they wanted to make sure everybody who had need had whatever they needed. But there was also this commonality. There was this fellowship that we're supposed to have with one another, that if we see something, we should be able to question it in love. And obviously, that's why it's so important to have built these relationships with one another. You can't just show up and check a box on Wednesday night and Sunday, and then just walk up to somebody and expect. But in this particular case, it's unfortunate. Eventually they broke up.
Yeah.
So, but initially it wasn't accepted very well, because it was like, I'm tired of people running my life, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and you make a really good point. It's the relationships that we make with people, and the relationship we have with individuals before a problem comes.
Absolutely.
After, for me not to know anybody and say, hey, I don't think he's right for you. Well, who are you?
True.
Right.
That's why I was saying it's very different, because
Yeah.
I know her.
Right.
Let
Yeah,
me turn it around and ask, what about when you're on the receiving end?
Mm-hmm.
That's
there, done
where
that,
we really
Colleen.
have to. Yeah, we have to. We've been there.
Yes.
We have to really use that wisdom. We were talking about the woman in the city town of Abel that had wisdom. We
Mm-hmm.
have to use our wisdom, and we have to analyze. I can remember my daddy would tell me, now if somebody criticizes you, the first thought needs to be, are they right? And evaluate that first. That's your first thought. And then you can, have a reaction to it.
Yeah, those are great thoughts, Colleen. One of the things that pops into my head is changing my attire. Ooh, that was a big change for me,
Mhm.
because I didn't see anything wrong with it. I wore what was comfortable. And sometimes what was comfortable to me was like, oh, it's, they're shorts.
Mm-hmm.
So being on the receiving end didn't always feel good at all, because it was just like, well, how long can you use the card of, well, I'm new here, I'm paraphrasing. Yeah. But
We'll only be new for a little while. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. But yes, and then as I've grown as a Christian, things would come up that the older women would mention something to me or whatever. And like you said, I would have to take a step back. Number one, what does it say in 1 Corinthians 13? Love believes all things. So I need to take a step back. Is what they're saying to me true though? Before I get this kind of rare.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be completely bogus.
That's true.
Yes.
It may be.
Yep.
Someone may just be telling you their opinion, not a Bible
there too.
conclusion, but just their feeling about something.
Yes.
But we still have to receive it in the spirit of love. Yeah. With an understanding that they really believe that, they really feel that that's true, and they're trying to help. But boy, that gets hard sometimes.
And what I've found is that the people that tell you the things you really need to know and will really help you grow are your enemies. They want to pull you down, and they're brazen, and they will tell you things, and you'll go, and it'll just make you mad. And then I've had this happen before, and later I was like, he told me something that really helped me get over a sin. If I had waited on my friends or Christians to tell me, they might have, not felt comfortable doing that. He was happy to do it. And I could have fiddled around with that sin for decades.
Yeah.
But I lopped it off with a big meat cleaver the day he pointed it out to me.
Yeah. Glad to show you that you were doing what was wrong. That's right. So, Montelle, you want to weigh in on this?
Oh boy. Well, on either side, I've certainly been the recipient of someone telling me something I need to do differently, or, and just being humble.
Right.
It's not always easy to take it in a spirit of humility and being willing to face what I'm really doing to myself sometimes, and then I expect, when I go to someone with something, I expect them to be humble about it.
Right.
But I got to be humble too,
That's
so.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I thought about Miriam in terms of who did she save? She didn't really save Moses. It was Pharaoh's daughter that pulled him out of the water. I mean, she couldn't save him. She was unable to do that. She did not have the power to. But I think of Miriam as having saved Moses's childhood, or his early training, if you will. Had Miriam spoken up and said, "Oh, I'll go get a nurse for you," had she just said, "Oh, Mom, Pharaoh's daughter got him, everything's great," she just
Right. Yeah.
okay, he's safe now. No, he'll be in a great home. But she saved his mental development by having him raised by his mother, an Israelite, who taught him all about God and everything he needed to know.
Absolutely.
Children were weaned later, much, much later than Americans do. I mean, it would have been years that she would have been before they would have considered him to be weaned. And in all that time, the mother and the father were really able to influence him, teach him what he needed to know. I taught kindergarten, and one year I had a group of kids. 5 years later, they were fifth graders, and I had been changed over to teaching fifth grade. And I told somebody, I think I told their mother, or probably my mother, I said, those kids are the same. By kindergarten, by that 5 or 6 years old, I always think they are what they're going to be. I mean, because early training is so important. I see Miriam as having saved his early training, and it was a godly growth.
And he was the only, really, you try to think of anybody else that could have filled the role of Moses. I don't think that person existed. All the rest, everybody else was a slave, even his brother and sister. That he had a great education. He knew the royal family. He had a big, wide view of the world. He was rich. So he was the perfect person to be a leader of this nation of slaves. They didn't have anything going for them. And Isla, like you said, who knows how far that first, second, third, fourth year the training in the first, second, and fourth year will go.
Right.
How far it will follow you the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
That's good.
The last ones that we had on this on our list, and of course I kept thinking of more, but I didn't send you more. But we've got Shifra, if that's how you say it, and Pua.
Shifra, yeah.
Shifra and Pua, and they are in Exodus chapter 1 and verses 15 through 21. Do any of you have that, or I'll look it up?
I do.
Hey, Isla, can I interrupt for a second? I thought you missed JL. She was her earlier. Were we not going to do her?
Well, I think when you were off camera,
you did her. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
About her then. So, can you read for us then Exodus 1:15 to 21?
Yes. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, the first, whose name was Shiphrah, and the second, whose name was Pua, when you help the Hebrew women give birth, observe them as they deliver. If the child is a son, kill him. But if it's a daughter, she may live. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt had told them. They let the boys live. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, "Why have you done this and let the boys live?" The midwives said to Pharaoh, "The Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife can get to them." That part makes me chuckle. So God, verse 20, so God was good to the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very numerous. Since the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Pharaoh then commanded all his people, "You must throw every son born to the Hebrews into the Nile, but let every daughter live." This story here, y'all. So I shared this with Isla. I spoke at a ladies' event last October, and this was the topic I was given. I had read over the story a couple times, but didn't really, I don't know, you read Exodus, then you read Exodus 2. Yeah. That's kind of as far as it went, but deep diving into this story is unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. It was so many things, and I can't go through all of that, but
they were so brave. I mean, they were amazingly brave. Yeah.
So that was one of the topics that I taught you. How they were just daring, in that they feared God so much, and this shows, their actions show that they feared God and over man, and did not even take a second thought as to what Pharaoh could possibly do to them.
Yeah,
Pharaoh could have had them killed.
Right.
Like, really, could have had them killed, but the story just tells us that he came to them and said, "Why did you do this?" And they, quick thinking again, right? Here we go with more women. Quick thinking, like, what do we say? Hey, those Hebrew women, they're on it. Like, by the time we get there, baby's here. So it's just an amazing story of being courageous
Mm-hmm.
and not taking a second thought about what man could do to them. They were more concerned about those babies and
Yep.
killing innocent life
Right.
because of an evil man.
Yep.
It's just
Yep.
amazing to me. And you know, when you go back to the beginning, before verse 15, you get more of a backstory as to what's going on with the children of Israel and how oppressed they were, and even through all of that, God was still blessing them, because the harder that Pharaoh's men would be on them, the more God blessed them. They were just like working, slaving, but God still multiplied them.
Right.
He still blessed them. And that's what led Pharaoh to this decision. Think about it. Like, look at all these strong men. Like, how we're giving them so much strenuous, like, I can imagine some of these people, I mean, they're not all young, right? Young and in shape. These people of Israel, all ages, I think, enslaved, right? So there may be some who the labor was just so horrible that they didn't live through it. But there were many who did. And the Pharaoh saw that. He was like, they're too strong. I need to do something. Mm-hmm. So his thought process is, oh, you can let the weakling daughters live, but get rid of the boys, because eventually, I mean, they're going to grow up looking like, no, I got to get rid of them.
Yeah. You know, Pharaoh was concerned about the men being warriors and revolting, so he had to do something about that. So,
but these women, they just these few verses shows so much strength. So much strength. Yep. And I think, okay, if I'm ever in a position in today's world, right? If I'm ever in a position where I have to make a decision, am I going to go with God, or am I going to shrink back because I fear man and what they can do to my body, but not my soul?
And I can see Jesus in their lives. He defied authority. They were willing to do whatever it took to do the right thing, even if it meant death. Jesus did that. He defied the Jewish authorities, the Sanhedrin, the scribes and the Pharisees. He didn't just say, "Hey, you guys need to, tighten it up a little bit. Let me show you some scriptures." No, he called them a brood of vipers.
Right.
And he wasn't afraid, and he did it with a straight face and with a serious face, and it was enough that they wanted to kill him, and then they ended up doing that. So
yeah. A connection I also make it with Jesus's story, I guess you would say, is how after the wise men came and outwitted Herod and didn't deliver Jesus to him, and it says they went another way back home again. Yes. That God came to Joseph and he said, "You need to take Mary and Jesus and you need to flee to Egypt." And it says that right then Joseph obeyed. He didn't stop and think, well, I don't know anybody in Egypt. What am I going to do? How am I going to work? And, he saved the child by getting up and going immediately. And then Herod was like the Pharaoh, because he came in and killed the male children in that area too. Connections like that are ones that I see in the story. And again, I know it's not by accident, that God puts details in the story that make that kind of lead us to think about Jesus.
True.
Montelle?
Oh, sorry.
I've heard much from you. You got a
I thought about not Jesus, but his disciples, his apostles. They when they were told not to speak in his name anymore, they said, "Should we obey God or man?" You know, and it was a rhetorical question, of course. But they weren't afraid either. They were, by the power of the Holy Spirit that was given to them, they lost their fear of man.
good,
and
good.
and fear of pain. You know, they were beaten.
Right. Counted it all joy, Paul says, you know, all those, whatever the persecution or was, he was, you know, he was glad to suffer for Christ.
Yes.
Very
We
good.
don't have to deal with fear and pain every day. You know, we have pretty comfortable life. Now, some people do. I'm not saying no one does.
Right.
But really, when you think about it, or you watch a movie, you know, fear and pain will drive people to do just about anything if they can get out of that. If you think of situations maybe that you've been in, maybe like childbirth, you know, what you would do to get out of that pain. And that is really serious. And that the fact that all of these people that you're mentioning, you were willing to defy authority. Even though there were threats against them.
In order to save someone, save their family, save their people. All of them, as you say, all the different women that we've talked about in the previous program and then this one. I mean, they were courageous, they were faithful, they really were full of faith in order to do these things and to save the ones that they did.
And they were bold.
Yes.
They were bold.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you ladies staying with us and doing this program. Thank you very much. And Montelle, we're glad to have had you. We've thrown you right into it, you know.
I'm kind of shy by nature, but
this was great conversation.
Yeah.
And I loved all the points that you ladies made.
Yes.
Some things that I haven't thought about in a long time. So.
Right. Always good for us. Thank you, Colleen. We always appreciate your thoughts and
yes, thank you
so much. Thank you all so much. Well, we'll say good night at this time, and thank you all so much for viewing.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.